Welcome to the Elevating La Cultura podcast, a space where I talk with Latinas who are passionate about what they do and are willing to share that passion with others to change the narrative, especially for the next generation. Each season is centered around different topics, but all with a Latina perspective. Welcome to Season 8, where we will talk all things corporate and higher education. I'm so excited to share these powerful stories. So vámonos, and let's get into it. Hola, today I'm hanging out with Samantha, an insurance and financial consultant with over 15 years of experience. During COVID, she made the decision to transition from the 9-to-5 life, cultivate her passion for travel, become an entrepreneur, and launch her business Hood Girls Travel Too, which is a travel coaching community that aims to educate self-proclaimed hood girls and women about the many skills they possess that are transferable to a life of travel and adventure that they might feel is out of their reach. By working one-on-one or in small groups to create their ideal travel plans, book the trip, and hit the road, she hopes to create a generation of female solo and group travelers. As she builds her business, she is also studying to become a therapist and fulfill a personal goal to bring more diversity and cultural competency to the mental health field. Please enjoy our conversation. Hey, I am so excited to be speaking with Samantha today. We have been building our relationship via online for maybe 2 years now. Shout out to Mari from Latinx Marketing. She was on the podcast a few seasons ago, but we met through her program and cohort, and we realized that we are sometimes in Chicago together, so let's connect. And so I've had the pleasure of meeting you in person this past year, and we've been hanging out in real life. And so it's always so fun to bring internet friends into our real life circles. So I'm so excited to have you on the podcast today. But I know I can go on and on, but before we get into it, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here. I'm Samantha Alvarez. I am from the south side of Chicago, and I am the owner and CEO of Hood Girls Travel Too, a travel company. And my background is I have about 15 years of experience in insurance and financial consulting, which I really love, but was looking for something new. And that brings me to where I am today, how I've met you, and we got connected.
Yes, I think it was a few months ago that we were in a networking event together. Shout out to the Comadre Brunches. But you were talking about all the things that you're doing. And I was like, I would love to have you on the podcast this season to talk about all of that. So why don't we start out with the story of what brought you to what you're doing now? How did you get into finance in the first place?
It's a bit of a winding road, but I started in finance probably my sophomore year of college, and I was just looking for a job to kind of help me pay off school while I was going to school. And I got connected with an insurance and risk management firm on the north side of Chicago. I came into the office as a clerk, so doing clerical things, administrative support. I moved up to an assistant level, and within a year and a half, I got credentialed to do the work on my own, so the insurance and the financial consulting directly. And because I'm bilingual, because I'm Latina, there was a market available to me that wasn't easily accessible to other people. And I found that I excelled really, really well in that. And it was a different environment for me. Growing up, I didn't have a lot of people around me who were in corporate settings. And I got a lot of support from my family from being in this job like that. I had found a career already so soon, so quickly after joining the workforce. And at the same time, I was in school, so working full time, going to school full time. And the success I had in the corporate world, it came with a great salary. I was making a lot more money than my peers, sometimes a lot more money than the adults in my life, my parents or my grandparents. And it kind of made me think of like, why am I in school right now? If I already have the career that people are going to school to accomplish, right? To get into the door, get their foot in the door, what, what's the reason for me being here? And I didn't have a good answer. I'm like, I already have what I need. Why do that? So after I completed my associates, I stopped going to school and I kept growing in my career. I got a few different, like small promotions, different trainings and stuff. And then I was offered a big promotion and I was kind of terrified by it. But I think I was kind of bored in the work I was doing. And it made me think like, if I take this promotion, I'm not going to do anything else with my life for like the next 5 years but this job. Like the money was really enticing, the stability of it, the fact that it was like a job that my family was like proud of me for having was really influential in me staying in it for so long. And I wanted something different. So I actually wound up landing on a TEFL certification program, which is teaching English as a foreign language. And I sat down with my boss, who's I had a really great relationship with. And he was so supportive when I told him, I'm like, this is what I'm thinking of doing. I want to go to Europe for the summer and get certified to teach English as a foreign language, and then maybe come back and hopefully the position will still be available for me. He was totally open to it, really supportive of me, like going out and traveling. And I did. So I gave him 2 months' notice. I found a subletter for my apartment and I moved to the Czech Republic for what was supposed to be just a summer turned into a few years because as soon as I got there, I was learning tons. I was meeting new people, eating new foods, like all these experiences that, as a girl from like Pilsen on the southwest side of Chicago, I didn't have a lot of exposure to, and I wanted more. So I wound up calling my boss back and saying, like, I really appreciate your willingness to be flexible on this, but I think I'm going to be staying here for a while. And he had kind of predicted that, so it was really like there was no ill will there. So I spent just under 3 years in the Czech Republic, and I was teaching English in a kindergarten during the morning from like 5 a.m. to 2 p.m. And then in the evening, I was teaching adults conversational English in an architectural firm. And it was a great day. There was so much I loved about my life. I don't think there's anything I would say I didn't like about my lifestyle there. But then shortly after, I think like my 1.5 year mark of being there, I made kind of a silly mistake and I let my visa expire. And I was involved in a raid in my language school where I was teaching the children's academy. And if you think about when they have like immigration type raids here in the States, it's usually going to be like where they assume a lot of undocumented people are going to be. And at this moment in time, that's what I was. I was an undocumented person in the Czech Republic. And that's where they do their raids is language schools. Cause unfortunately it's pretty high propensity of like people being undocumented or letting their papers lapse. And so I was arrested as part of that, and I spent like a brief amount of time in a Czech prison as a result because my documentation wasn't in order. I was in the country illegally, and it was a really unexpected and like impactful experience for me. I don't know that I knew how to process everything that was happening. To not be able to like leave somewhere of your own volition, it was really a jarring experience for me. And when I did get out, I had the option to be deported right away or to stay in the country and fight. And I wanted to stay in the country, so I was fighting because apart from my papers being expired, there was nothing else I had done wrong. I felt like I wanted to stay and that I should be able to access that, that access the rights to stay. And I went through this long court case, and I did wind up at the end losing the court case, but not being able to have my punishment reduced a lot. So I wasn't fined. There wasn't like any significant damage to my record. I was able to return to Europe after a certain period of time. And after that, was not really able to easily return to like, once I came back to the States, I wasn't able to easily return to like the corporate lifestyle I had been living. Um, and I was struggling a lot, to be honest, with like what I wanted to do, because there was a big impact in my mental health. Being in isolation as an American citizen, when I was in the Czech Republic, they kept me in like a cell by myself so that there would be no like incidents with an American because that could cause problems for them. And that isolation was really heavy, and I didn't know how difficult it was on me until once I was back home. And when I was back home, I stumbled across a documentary of a gentleman whose name is Khalif Browder. And if you're not familiar, he's a young man who um, was arrested by the police in New York City, and is accused of stealing like a book bag. And he was kept on Rikers Island because he couldn't pay the bail. And after like a long time in solitary confinement, he was released. He came home, and shortly thereafter committed suicide. And as due to the impacts of that like prolonged isolation, and something in that was very relatable to me, and it made me angry in a way that like I wanted to move to action. So I joined a program in Chicago called Public Allies, which is a leadership development program. It's run by AmeriCorps, and it helped me sort of transition from a corporate lifestyle, from a strictly corporate and like finance lifestyle, to learning how to use those skills to support the community and fight for social justice. And the sort of path I took there, I started working with workforce development, life skills. I was working in different prisons around the city of Chicago, providing tutoring services, GED training support, like prepping people to take their GEDs. And I actually kind of quickly rose in an organization I was working for to be the associate director of workforce development, which was a program that was designed entirely to support returning citizens who are either within a few months or few years of returning back to society from being incarcerated, or who are on work release programs. And it's probably the happiest I've ever been doing any work, just because it was so direct. Um, like the effects of being of service were so clear, that I was helping people and supporting them in making their own decisions for their lives, and like taking ownership of the capacity they have to make decisions and form their own life. And that was really profound for me. Um, as sort of a blessing in disguise, around that time, my organization lost, well, there was a change in like in government leadership, and we lost a lot of funding. So I was part of a mass layoff during that role. But shortly after is when I think you and I met around that time. I started working as a financial coach and a housing counselor in an organization on the north side of Chicago called Center for Changing Lives. I really loved the work there, and it helped me recognize how much I had been kind of running at like 200% because I loved this work. At the time I was doing the associate director position, I had also returned to school at DePaul University, and I was working on a BA in restorative adult education. Um, and I kept working on that when I went to Center for Changing Lives, but it helped me. I really appreciate that experience at Center for Changing Lives because it helped me recognize how much I had been carrying from my other job, of like helping people who were going through like crises and trauma. And it made me realize I didn't have the skills to manage my own emotions around it and not take it all home with me. Um, so shortly after I um, changed my major from restorative adult education to psychology, and that's where what I'm currently studying right now. My goal there is to become a therapist to be able to serve the same population of returning citizens or currently incarcerated people, and from a mental health perspective, because I think there's so many ways where there's this expectation um, that people rehabilitate in environments and incarceration that are incredibly harmful, and they don't are not actually designed to cultivate any sort of like humanity or change. It's just meant to really control. So that's something that I am working on now, which I'm really passionate about. But through this all, I have to pay for school. I have to keep the lights on. I have to pay my bills. And I have continued to work in finance. I moved to Philadelphia, I think shortly after we met. I moved to Philadelphia and I was working for a pretty big financial firm there. And the stability of that allowed me to pay for school, have some freedom to explore around the East Coast. And it made me really excited to be intentional about my life. I didn't, I think ever since I came back from being in the Czech Republic, I didn't pay as much attention to what like my family wanted of me. Not that I didn't care about it, but I think I learned that like there's so much that's going to try to dictate your life. And you really have to decide who's making the choices and where that influence is coming from. Um, so basically, I have been working with financial contract based jobs to pay for school and to help supplement to launch my small business, which was also born out of what happened to me in the Czech Republic. Like being somebody who was from a lower income community in Chicago, I didn't know my rights when I was in another country. I didn't know what I could ask for. I didn't know what to do. And I think I've learned since that had I asked for certain things, that process would have gone a lot smoother and I probably wouldn't have spent any time incarcerated. And the like my the reason behind my business came from wanting to get that information out there, like how accessible things are now, in terms of like being able to do your homework in advance of what the rules are, what you should be paying attention to, how important it is to respect the laws of every country you're in, because something that's illegal in their country might not be illegal where you're from, so you might not be aware of it, and just how to be safe and use the skills you already have as somebody who's like capable, resourceful, um, to travel and be out in the world. So that kind of brings us to where I am now, where I'm building my business. I am going to school. Those are my two biggest priorities. And to, be an adult and pay my bills, I am working some like freelance contracts in finance still. So I'm grateful for the job stability that that experience has kept for me. But I look forward to the day where I can kind of step away from that more and give myself fully to both like psychology work and building my business.
When I listen to your story, and this is the first time that I've heard the intricacies of your life, I am just so inspired by how, with each point in your life, you've taken action even during the hard times. And it has like propelled you to move to the next thing. And with each movement of the next thing, like your goal has always been to like, okay, how can I better myself and how can I better like this situation? How can I better my community? Like I want to learn from all of my experiences so that I can be a help to anyone else that might be going through a similar situation in the future. And I am so influenced by just your heart in all of this. Like I'm really grateful for the fact that you shared your story. I think it is super inspirational to anyone who hears it and encouraging, because a lot of times we get stuck in that when something is blocking us, or like that we're coming up to an opposition or a wall, what it seems like would be a wall in our journey. Like we get caught up in that mindset and think like, oh well, maybe I shouldn't have done that, and maybe I should just go back to something safe or go back to safety. And hearing your story just gives I would hope that it gives the listeners hope to find that piece to the puzzle of how you can continue building and how you can continue moving forward and using each opportunity, or what seems like a fork in the road, like that opportunity to learn even more and to build your skills, and not see it as a hindrance or not see it as a setback. So like your story is fascinating. I'd love to go back to when you were thinking about leaving the country to teach English as a foreign language. I forgot what you said it was called.
TEFL, the TEFL
TEFL,
program.
yes.
Yeah.
How did you get the like how did you find that program, and what was your thinking of like, okay, this is where I want to go next?
Yeah, so I really led was because I work in finance, I really led with budget. Like what can I afford? And I had a certain amount of savings because I was my only expense at the time. And I kind of did research on where can I go and earn money and have a certain amount of freedom. And that the teaching English abroad is what I found was the most, made the most sense. So then I kind of whittled it down to what countries can I have the strongest exchange rate against the dollar. So where is my money going to go farthest for me? And it was between Vietnam and the Czech Republic, because the Czech Republic, although it's in Europe, is not on the euro; it's on the Czech krona. Uh, so the dollar goes farther there. And as much as Vietnam is a lovely place I hope to visit one day, I just know myself, and I don't think it would be somewhere I'd want to be for a whole 3 months. You know, if I was going to be there for the summer. So that's how I narrowed down the Czech Republic. And I think in terms of finding the programs, I just really did like a deep dive in of like Googling. Because at this time, this is, oh gosh, I'm totally dating myself. This is before Instagram entirely. Facebook was around, but it wasn't used wasn't used as like a utility for connecting groups yet as much. And I did join some groups, and I found some websites where we could join groups to like share ideas about stuff. And um, the biggest community I saw that was accessible to people who only spoke English or like a language or not the native language was the Czech Republic. Just because the amount of people who speak Czech is so low, there's tons of people there who speak other languages. So Spanish, German, Italian, French. It was a little bit more accessible to me than going to like a Vietnam, where the language is so starkly different than English. But yeah, basically lots of like Googling and going down like deep wells of websites and different internet searches.
That is so, and I remember when Instagram was not even a thing, and like
Yeah.
Facebook was only like between schools and colleges. So don't feel bad. I'm sure like most of my listeners can remember that time too. But thankfully Google was there. Um,
Yes.
During your time in education, like when you were getting your associates and through all of your transitions, did you experience any microaggressions or biases? And how did that change, like your experience, how you experience them in the US versus like in another country? Were there differences?
Yes. So I didn't really experience a lot of biases in the US in education while I was getting my associates. I got my associates at Harold Washington College, which is City College of Chicago. So I think people are just coming and going so quickly. There's not a whole lot of like community cultivation. There is now, from what I understand, but at the time I went, there wasn't. So really, I was just going to class, coming like, and then coming home, and that's it. I didn't spend a lot of time on campus. I would say while I was in Europe, the sort of biases that I heard a lot. Um, so I'm Mexican American and I look Mexican, right? So while I was in Europe, the response I got was very warm when people assumed I was only Mexican, like that I was there as a Mexican citizen, there on a Mexican passport. And the people that I created relationships with and had friendships with, once they learned that I was a Mexican American, they weren't even shy about like their sort of like disdain, like, and it wasn't necessarily about me. It's like, oh, you're American. Like there's just I think there is the stereotype of Americans in Europe or Americans abroad anywhere is like a stereotype for a reason. I encounter so many people who have these expectations that they're going to be able to get the American treatment when it comes to like customer service, when it comes to apartment rentals, anything that you can think of. And that's not the case, like there's different customs and cultures. And I think growing up, traveling to Mexico a lot, I was already familiar with that. So I think the reason why it took so long for people to recognize that I was also American is because I learned how to respect people and their spaces when I'm the guest, with exception, of course, of letting my visa expire and getting deported. That was a big lesson learned, but also a big American lesson. Apparently, it's very common for Americans to do that. And but when I came back to the States and I went back to school, and I sort of here and there would share my story about what happened in Prague. I actually received a lot of like, there was so much surprise. Like, why were you in Europe? Like what somebody like me thought I was doing in Europe. Like the surprise that like I knew that Europe existed, that I knew how to travel there. And, it was just mostly from like non POCs and I won't even say just non POCs, but also it was more of like almost like a classist thing. So people who were more affluent like made these assumptions of like, how did like a poor brown girl like you get across the country, get across the world to another country, let alone all that stuff happen. So that I experienced a lot. Because when you do those like the first day of classes, you do those like, let's go around and tell somebody something about yourself, why you're here, why you're studying this. I think anytime I would share in those spaces, I would get a lot of like surprise, and it was coming from like the professors, which was really disappointing because like you're supposed to create this space where I'm comfortable being vulnerable and saying I don't know and learning and growing, and I walk in the door and you're already kind of assigning I don't know, like a criteria to me that like there's a box I should fit in, that because have because I now don't, you're treating me slightly different.
Yeah. When you think back to yourself before you went to college and as you were younger, did you think that you would have the life and the experiences that you had? Like, what did you want to be when you grew up, when you were younger?
So I did not at all. I guess I didn't think that my future would look how it wound up looking. when I was younger, I was actually involved in a lot of local campaigns, and I was a community organizer. And I did a lot of work around like housing and renters' rights. And there were a lot of people in my immediate circle, not my family per se, but like my aunts or my cousins or the people around me who were really involved in social justice issues. So I was out at like protests and sit-ins. And because of all the work I had done with campaigns, I felt like, and I saw from a young age, like how the injustices kind of all paint a picture of like, we wind up here because of the lack of resources here. So I actually thought in my, like, I would say adolescence that I might be in like public office one day, or that I might be running like a nonprofit organization or something. So part of that came true. And I think it was just sort of life's way, because I was in corporate for so long. I think it was life's way of just like rounding me back out to what I wanted, or what maybe my heart is best suited for, to what I'm doing now. But yeah, I won't say super different from what I wanted to be when I was younger. Um, but it wound up looking different at the end.
Yeah, I'm always so interested in seeing the thread of like your younger life experiences and how they've influenced what you're doing now as an adult. And I can definitely see the thread. So that is amazing that you are still advocating and pursuing uh, your career through that social justice lens and with that like goal and foundation. Um, how has it been going back to school? Because I know that you mentioned like you were great with your associates and you're like, I'm just going to continue like moving up. And that's like the the plan. Like that's what people aspire to. And for you to come back like years later and say like, okay, I think I'm ready to continue my education. Like, how has that been re-entering the higher education life?
Yeah, I think between DePaul in Chicago and like Temple University, which is where I am in Philadelphia, um, was probably about 3.5 to 4 years, that gap between those two. And because of that, when I came back, I actually had to take a technology class, which is the funniest thing. It was the biggest marker of like, oh, it's been a while since I've been in school. Because I hadn't been in school within 2 years, they required me to take a technology class that was like, like your standards, like Microsoft, like Office or Suite. So you can go through all the different programs. um One, it was a big lesson in how kind of outdated even university thinking is, because although Excel is a huge like program, Excel, Microsoft Word, etc., like I feel like Google Office is actually the more prominent one that I use in all of my jobs now. um so it was interesting to see that my time in the workforce actually taught me so much, and it brought me like to a level of like, I don't need this class, but on paper I need this class. But it was good. It was like helpful to like kind of ease me back into it. It was nice to not start off with like the heavy stuff right away. um I am finding that like I haven't written papers in a long time, and that is such an undertaking, because I'm studying psychology. A lot of it has to be very clinical. Like there's a lot of research I have to do, and the way I have to like annotate things and cite things. That is something I feel like I could have left in my past and never done again. But unfortunately, being in psychology now, I feel like it will be part of my life for a long time moving forward. But I think I'm like a continuous learner. I love the classroom. Most of my classes are online now, unfortunately, but I love the experience of learning, especially if it's something I'm interested in. Like I could sit there and like talk and debate and discuss things for days if it's something that excites me or grabs my attention. So it hasn't been too rough. I think maybe the biggest challenge has been making sure to carve out time for it, because I guess when I was doing my associates, that was the last time I was fully in person, and all my classes were at night or on the weekend. So I had to be somewhere to do my homework or to like participate in class at a certain time. Whereas now I have deadlines, but I don't have to be anywhere. Like I don't have to be on like a Zoom class or anything. So it requires a lot more time management than I think it did the first time around.
Hmm. How do you organize all of that with everything that you're doing? I think a lot of like there has been a huge like shift in the way that education is done, especially since the pandemic. Um, how have you shifted like your mindset in order to organize all the different areas of your life? I think this is like a helpful question for anyone, whether they're in business life or like trying to figure out if they want to invite like an like higher education or more education, continuing education into their lives again.
Yeah, I would say that I live and die by my calendar. If it's not on the calendar, it either didn't happen or it's not gonna get done. Like, and something I love, God, I love Instagram Reels because I learned how to like color code each of my calendars because I have my business calendar, my school calendar, and then my personal calendar, right, for my personal life. And I have adjusted the color coding of each different reminder because I think what happens with like smartphones is that we kind of get like notification fatigue of like things just coming in too much. So if it's not in the right color, I won't think like, oh, this is important. This is for school. I have to get it done. Even like this us today, this podcast had to go. It was in a rust orange color on my business calendar. Like, that's something that's really important for me. But I think I've learned that routine is the best thing. Like I have to, like I clean my house every Saturday. I do my laundry every Sunday. I do groceries on Wednesdays. Like I think having that sort of methodical process, it helps me keep everything in order because like especially with schoolwork, you never know how long it's going to take. Like if you're not understanding a concept and you have to reread it or like do more research, it could take 45 minutes, it could take 3 hours. So I have to build in a lot of time for myself. But having those systems of like, okay, I'm giving myself this much time on the calendar, and then I'm going to make sure I have snacks for it. I'm going to make sure, I'm not distracted. I'm putting things on do not disturb. And also, I would say having people in your community, like your friends or family, that know, that have been through it, like been through higher education, whether they went through it all in like one lump sum or they're going back to school themselves, help keep you accountable. Like that's so, so helpful. One of my best friends, she's like, how are you doing on this? And I'll be like, oh, don't ask me. I should have done my homework yesterday, but I got to do it today. But it's so good to like have an accountability because I'm not really accountable to her, but she helps me remember that like I want this for myself and it's important to me. So I need to get back, I need to buckle up and get it done.
Wow, that's good advice. I also live by my calendar, like, and it's all color coded so that I can like use less brain cells trying to figure out what side of my brain I need to turn on for this. Um, but what are your goals for when you finish your education? Like, what do you want to do with your psychology degree?
Yeah, so my goal is to become a therapist, a talk therapist. Throughout like all the things I've navigated, I've been in and out of therapy for like 7 years, and I just see such an amazing impact that it has, like an influence that it has. So I hope to be able to provide that support to people as they're returning. So with the returning population to help them work through whatever they need to not go back, to recidivism reduction, and recidivism being like the rate at which people who have been incarcerated are likely to go back to prison. So reducing that, I think, is my ultimate goal, um, to support people in learning more about themselves so maybe they can adapt behaviors that haven't served them well in the past, or they can learn to maybe step away from people who are harmful or toxic to them, who also are part of the problem. I like the idea that therapy work nowadays can be done remotely. So it complements my lifestyle of traveling, and will sort of be complementary as well to like me continuing to grow my business because I can do both on the road essentially. So that is my long-term goal. I'm being intentional now and setting myself up to have a lifestyle that looks how I want it to.
Yeah, and what are your goals for your business, your travel business?
Yeah, so I will be launching my website soon, with my travel business. Apart from having like a social media presence and providing tips and snippets, sort of reviews of where I've been, where I will go, I also provide travel planning and coaching services. So I think it's really common for us to have the experience where like we want to go somewhere, but none of our friends either want to go or they say they want to go, but then when it comes down to it, they don't like get on top of things and like make plans or save money for it. Um, so we wind up not going. So as travel coaching to help people stay accountable to what they want for themselves and to make that happen, and I also, as part of that, do some like travel companion services where if you do want to travel somewhere, but you really do not want to go alone, you want to share that experience with somebody, I provide that service as well. I've already had 6 clients now who I've done that with over the past like year and a half. And it's been so great. Ideally, with my business, I want people who feel like they're not seen in travel spaces or they don't see themselves represented to come have one-on-one or small group like travel coaching sessions with me, potentially travel with me as well. And I want them, after a few times of using my service, I don't want them to have to use me again. I want them to build the skill to be able to do it for themselves and influence the people around them, because it's such a beautiful, amazing experience to go outside of your own environment and out of your comfort zone. I don't think had I not done that, I think my life would be in a completely different place.
I love like your energy, and whenever I spend time with you, I'm just like excited about life. So if anyone is looking for a travel companion, like look at look no further. And why don't you take this time to share where people can find you and connect with you and all of the different things that you do?
Yeah, thank you. So I am on Instagram mainly. For my travel business, it's under Hood Girls Travel 2, TOO. That is also the website, hoodgirlstravel2.net, which is launching at the end of October. And I am available on Facebook as well. I just am not as active there. My personal Instagram, where you can find me if travel's not really your passion, is my Chicana Life, on Instagram and on Facebook. And I have a big community there where we get together and kind of just talk things out. That's actually where you and I connected first, I think. So I welcome people to reach out if they have questions, if they just want to commiserate, share their own stories. I also in December am launching a YouTube channel for my travel company to kind of tell it. There's a lot more detail to the story about Czech Republic and how that happened and how I worked it all out. So I'll be telling stories like that and inviting guests as well to tell their story.
Oh, that's exciting. I'm excited for that to drop. Um, all right. So I always ask all my guests, what encouragement or advice would you have for the next generation? And you can take it however you want. If you want to talk about travel or higher ed or corporate life, like overall, what is that encouragement or advice that you would have?
The advice that I would give is advice that I got in the form of a question from a professional advisor that I had while I was at DePaul. Her name is Sonia Antellect. She asked me while I was trying to plan out my educational future, she said, do you have a good support system in place to help you get through this? And at the time, I didn't think it was an important question. And I think I probably gave her a frivolous answer. But I think about that question every time I do anything or make any big decisions in life. Do I have a supportive community or people in my community who can potentially help me if I need help with it, or be an ear if I need someone to listen if things don't go well. And I try to, when I'm making this decision to do something new, I try to identify those people in advance for myself so that I know if like something goes wrong, if there's a hiccup, I can reach out to XYZ person and just feel supported, right? And I'm so thankful for her asking that question when she did, because I think the things that I see through are the things that I put my effort into are the things that I don't feel alone in. That even if like I'm building my business on my own, but even the community that you and I are part of, your community, Comadres, and other networking communities, it helps me feel like renewed that like I can do this. Like there are other people who look like me who can do this. And there's other people who look like me or know me and care about me who want me to succeed, and I can tap into them when I'm feeling like I can't, when I'm feeling like I don't have it, like I'm feeling like I can't get it done. So that's the advice I would share. Look around you.
Yes, that is so good. I I really need to ask myself those questions or that question too. Uh, this conversation has been amazing. I am so thankful for your time, for your willingness to share your story. And I know that, again, I've said it, I am so inspired by you and the wisdom that you share every time that we connect. And I hope my listeners have so many takeaways as well. So thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for creating a space where I feel safe and being vulnerable and opening up. I really appreciate you. And thank you for having me.
Yeah, and I'm sure we'll connect soon. I know that you're doing some traveling soon, but you know, whenever you're in Chicago, you know that we can get together. So I'm sure I'll see you soon.
Yes, absolutely.
All right, bye.
Bye.
All right, just kidding. We are back for a quick update with Samantha. So I'm gonna let you update us on what you got going on.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I did want to make sure that I shared that there is a podcast forthcoming for Hood Girls Travel 2. It will be called Hood Girls Travel 2, the podcast. And just like the travel community, the podcast is a space for girls from the hood to share their own travel journeys and adventures. And while we do have a good time on the podcast, sharing those stories, really the space is meant to kind of convey a message that I think is really important, and I think other people do as well. And that message is that we can take where we're from with us. Like, contrary to things we might have learned growing up about fitting in or assimilation, we don't have to leave part of us behind to succeed or to enjoy life or to have like a full functioning and fulfilling life. Um, because those things that home and the hood have taught us and about life and how to navigate certain situations and about people, a huge part of that is so beneficial to us in the rest of the world and the rest of our lives. And a huge part of who we are is where we're from. And something I want to make sure that we share through the podcast is that we get to decide and define what that means to us, what where we are from means to us, and how we want to use it to show up in the world. So through the podcast, essentially, there's some episodes where it's just me talking about like my travel stories and my travel journey. And there's guests who we talk about where they're from, what their favorite things to do, where they're from is, where to eat, where to go, what to see, etc. and really some of the challenges they might have had to navigate traveling or learning to become a traveler if it's not something their family did growing up. So I'm really excited for the space and for people to feel maybe seen or heard or be able to relate a little and encourage somebody who isn't feels like that lifestyle of travel isn't for them to reach out to either myself or to other guests and start making a plan for what their travel personality or persona is going to be. The first episode the intro episode drops on Black Friday, so Thanksgiving weekend, and the first episode will drop on December 1st. And I'm really excited. It actually will continue to tell the story that I started telling here on this podcast about my time in Prague and how I wound up getting arrested because of my visa, how I got out of that situation, and how I've learned from it since. So I really hope people enjoy it and tune in.
Yeah, awesome. I mean, we need more representation in the podcast world, so I am excited. So this episode is going to air before your podcast drops, so we will be on the lookout. I will share once it does go live, and I'm excited. Thank you so much for coming back and sharing that news, because I know we recorded a few weeks ago and a lot can change. Our goals and our inspiration is always evolving. So I am so excited for you to be announcing this new podcast, and I can't wait to listen.
Yeah, thank you so much for giving me this space to share it. And as a traveler yourself, I hope to have you on the podcast one day soon.
Yes, I love being a guest on the podcast. I mean, I love podcasting. So whenever I can just like sit back and be a guest, I am there. So let me know.
Will do.
All right, we will talk soon. Okay, now for real, the episode is over. Okay, bye. I just love hanging out and chatting with Samantha. She is so real and down to earth. Definitely a great person to hang out with, chismear with, and travel with. So be sure to follow and connect with her. Okay, amigos, thank you so much for listening. There will be a new episode every Tuesday, so after you listen, feel free to take a screenshot, post on Instagram, and tag at Elevating La Cultura, or send me a DM. You can also comment on this YouTube video if you're watching online. I always like to hear from people and how they resonate with the stories that I share. So leave a review on Apple Podcasts so we can get more ears listening to these stories and we can continue elevating la cultura. And if you haven't already, check out the website elevatinglacultura.com to see what in-person events I've got going on for you. And you can also see our new merch shop. All right, enjoy the rest of the day, afternoon, evening, whenever you're listening. Y nos vemos next week. Bye.